Mr. Speaker, I rise and I say goodbye to the Member of Parliament for Miku South. Mr. Speaker, I wonder what is the fascination of the Member of Parliament for Miku South, Mr. Speaker. At every single opportunity, Mr. Speaker, when we come to this House or we address matters of national importance in the country, the only thing the Member of Parliament for Miku South could do, Mr. Speaker, is to pour cold water, pour disdain, and try to encourage the people of St. Lucia to believe that we are exactly like him, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have a different Prime Minister, we have a different Minister of Finance, and we have a different political leader. We are determined to put the people of this country first. Mr. Speaker, I stand without hesitation, Mr. Speaker, to support the process towards the creation of the St. Lucia Sovereign Welfare, Mr. Speaker. It's an important statement, Mr. Speaker, as we are saying to the world that we are willing to do what we can do to adapt and mitigate. Climate change, Mr. Speaker, is in fact an existential threat, and it is one, Mr. Speaker, that we should take very seriously. The member for Miku South indicated that he was attending a conference with ECLAC and all the rest of those international organizations. But the point is, what did he do as a result of those conversations? That's the critical point. And at every single time, Mr. Speaker, since we've been in government, every single report, every single document we receive, Mr. Speaker, makes specific mention that we need to do what we can as a country to do what we can. We can't always rely entirely on the international community. Mr. Speaker, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change establishes that all countries have a responsibility for the challenges of climate change, but not have equal responsibility. Mr. Speaker, we are not the ones doing the damage, but we have a responsibility to ensure that we could deal with the issues confronting our country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, he mentions a few things about which projects that are going to be considered. We have not gotten that far. But what we know is, Mr. Speaker, between now and 2050, 34% of our of our beaches, Mr. Speaker, will experience erosion. How are we going to be able to finance that? We can't simply continue to come to this Parliament and say to the people of St. Lucia, let's borrow more and more and more. We need to think of a financial instrument, Mr. Speaker, that allows us to be able to access funding specifically for climate change, which is where the world is going at the moment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia's nationally determined contribution pledge contains an analysis which shows that the cost of funding for climate adaptation and mitigation projects will cost up to $368 million, Mr. Speaker. $368 million, Mr. Speaker. And if, Mr. Speaker, we fail to do that, Mr. Speaker, we are looking at a situation where 24.5% of our GDP, Mr. Speaker, could be lost with a simple storm, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member of Miku South indicated that the global financial system, as it stands, is unfair and does not serve us, with a Bajan accent, as if sounding like a Prime Minister in a different country, Mr. Speaker. But he fails to recognize that what we are doing here, Mr. Speaker, is to do exactly that. Give us the opportunity to be able to do what we can do for the people who've elected us in this House, Mr. Speaker. I represent a coastal community, Mr. Speaker. A coastal community. If I do not take those issues seriously, Mr. Speaker, who will? Who will, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, given the expenditure estimates and our recent experience with COVID-19, given the threats to present and future generations, Mr. Speaker, we must create a vehicle that allows St. Lucia to meet those expenditures in a novel and innovative way, Mr. Speaker. We believe, Mr. Speaker, that this fund is such a vehicle. Mr. Speaker, at every single turn, we try to do what is necessary to put the people of this country first, to put our intentions clear and forward for everyone to review and to have a look at. The member for Miku South comes into the House and uses all sorts of innuendo, Mr. Speaker, to cast aspersions on people, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we have to be very careful how we refer to investors who come into this country. Whether we like them or not, whether we spend time with them or not, we have to respect them, Mr. Speaker. Because one investor, Mr. Speaker, has friends with other investors, Mr. Speaker. And when we just deride them as all being the same, we know he flew to London, Mr. Speaker. The reason why he's so comfortable saying that, Mr. Speaker, because he knows very well that he himself flew to London. He asked me to accompany him when he became Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. He asked me to run for him as a candidate, Mr. Speaker. And today, Mr. Speaker, he sits there and he pretends as if he does not know what's happened. The only reason, Mr. Speaker, is because we decided that bribery is against the law in the UK and we were not going to take part in any of what he was trying to get us to do. So he comes and he pretends as if, yes, we have the record, he comes and he pretends as if everyone else is guilty and he's the only innocent one, Mr. Speaker. We know, Mr. Speaker, exactly why he's acting the way he's doing so. And Mr. Speaker, I had so much fun in my constituency on Sunday. I'm looking forward, Mr. Speaker, to having more of those public consultations, public discussions, Mr. Speaker, so we could let the people of St. Lucia know that Alan Shastney, the Member of Parliament for Biku North, has no good intention for the people of this country. Miku South, my apologies. Miku South has no good intentions for the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. None whatsoever. Why can't he simply stand up and say, yes, we tried the Sovereign Wealth Fund in 2017, we had the draft legislation, we got caught up with whatever it is, but yes, we see that you're bringing it forward. Perhaps you consider A, B, C, or D, Mr. Speaker. He has not said one good thing about this initiative, Mr. Speaker. An initiative that has been around the world for a very long time. We're not the only ones who are attempting to launch sovereign wealth funds, Mr. Speaker. The British government, Mr. Speaker, just recently did theirs. It was in their manifesto, and they went ahead and they did it. Why is it he's saying, why did the UK did it? Why is he not saying, why is the US trying to do it? Why is it only because St. Lucia has decided to do it that he has a problem? He has not said anything, Mr. Speaker, to suggest to us that the idea of the Sovereign Wealth Fund is a bad idea. All he seems to focus on is to remind us that he does not believe in the capability of the people of St. Lucia. That is all he keeps doing. The minister, the minister, the minister. The minister was put there by the people of St. Lucia. He was elected. He is responsible for the consolidated fund, Mr. Speaker. So why can't that same minister have a little responsibility to say, this is what I want? After consultation with cabinet, Mr. Speaker. That's all he seems to want to focus on, Mr. Speaker. But I said to him, Mr. Speaker, perhaps we could introduce him to some language, Mr. Speaker, or perhaps some reading. And I take a few words from a Lebanese American poet and writer, Mr. Speaker, Khalil Gibran. Progress, Mr. Speaker, lies not in enhancing what is, but in advancing towards what will be. We cannot afford to stay here, Mr. Speaker, today, that we could see what is down the road in the future, Mr. Speaker. We don't know what's going to happen with CIP because of his very actions. He was the one who went to Parliament and said all sorts of things about CIP. What does he think the rest of the world is going to react to it? So if CIP is encumbered and we have no other means of helping ourselves, you're saying to us, do not consider any alternative to be able to raise revenues for the country to do what they have to do. He's not a statesman, Mr. Speaker. The Indonesian president just came in from a different party. Did he deride what he found? No. He said, we have an issue in this country. 63 million children are not being fed breakfast every morning. He has created a sovereign wealth fund to deal specifically with feeding children every day in school. Specifically for that, we're saying climate change is an adaptation issue for us. $368 million US. What mechanism can we put in place to be able to address that? That's all it is. We've not gone on and looked at who is going to be directors, who's going to be investment managers, who's going to be custodian. This is just the beginning of the process. This is the bare bones that you need to have in place before you move to do anything else, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we all come into politics, Mr. Speaker, with a particular intention. And I was saying to the member for Social earlier, Mr. Speaker, why is it that we can't agree on some simple things for the benefit of the people of St. Lucia? Why does everything have to deride to politics, name-calling, mapui? We have enough to say about the Member of Parliament from Mico South. But you don't hear us saying it because we know for a fact what we repeat as a government is observed outside of St. Lucia. And we have to be careful of that, Mr. Speaker. We have to be careful of those things, Mr. Speaker. We need to say to ourselves as a people, some things are acceptable in politics and some things are not acceptable in politics. And if the Member of Parliament believes that he could take his second passport and leave St. Lucia when he's burnt it to the ground, evil follows him wherever he goes. He knows it will follow him wherever he goes. Stop taking this country for a game. This is serious business, Mr. Speaker. We are talking about people's lives. We're talking about people that I represent in my constituency. We have to be very serious about those things, Mr. Speaker. And it's every day when I think of this Member of Parliament from Mico South, and I listen to him, and I see what he says, what he records, what he puts out into the world, I do not understand why he believes that that is going to serve him. When you try to destroy the very same thing you need to rely on in the future, what is your point? What is your point? And I think St. Lucia needs to say, enough is enough. We understand there's political fight, there's political conversations. We understand that in the heat of discussions, tempers may go out of the way. But we must always understand that the people of St. Lucia, who the 17 of us represent, should always come first. And their interests should always come first. Mr. Speaker, always come first. You think there are things I can't say about the former Member of Parliament, Francis Eric Henrys? Every now and then I joke with him about me taking a little ride down the river in Roseau and what he had at a community meeting. But there is more that I could say. But I have a certain responsibility because I'm a Member of Parliament. I'm a Minister of Government. I can't just say what I want despite having evidence. I can't just say what I want because there's a consequence beyond me just saying it. We are dealing with the lives of a country, Mr. Speaker. And I think we should take this thing very, very seriously, Mr. Speaker. It's not a joke. It's a very serious thing. He derides Wasco and says, oh, we know what they're calling them today. What is that supposed to mean? If Wasco has an issue, we should be addressing it together, not saying you didn't do. The Member of Parliament was the Minister of Finance. They spent a significant amount of money to desilt the Roseau Dam. Mr. Speaker, if you go into my constituency now and you visit the dam, you would wonder if any desilting was done. So the consequence he's speaking about today, Mr. Speaker, is because of his actions, Mr. Speaker, or the lack thereof. So why is it he feels comfort in saying those things as if St. Lucians are so stupid? The people in Ancillary Canaries are not stupid. And on Sunday, they demonstrated that they're not stupid, and they will continue to demonstrate that. So when he says how much time I spend in England, I don't spend any more time in England than he spends in either Washington, at his home in Washington, or in Canada. I don't. I am in St. Lucia. I'm at work, delivering for the people of my constituency and the people of this country. I don't have time to play games with the Member of Parliament. This, Mr. Speaker, is a very important bit of legislation, Mr. Speaker. And I'm very proud that the Prime Minister, having given his instructions to move ahead with it, I was able to work with the Cabinet, with the Aegis Chambers. This was not done by a minister sitting on and writing what should be there. We took advice as to what should be in there. It wasn't a minister plotting. And he makes this point about this individual I used to work for. He knows very well that the reason why we ended up in this situation was because he said to the gentleman, I have no pedigree. He should get rid of me or he will block the project. And that's exactly what he did. That's what he did. And there are two lawyers from the overseas and one in St. Lucia who was present at the time. He said, this gentleman does not have pedigree. Either you get rid of him or I'm going to block this project. He said it. He said it. It was at Coco Palm, Mr. Speaker. He said it. Senior Minister, the former Prime Minister, and the member for St. Lucas would have remembered in Cabinet when he said, I have no pedigree, so I don't deserve to be involved in what I was involved with at the time. We did nothing wrong, Mr. Speaker. I know that, my brother. I don't need the member from Mico South to tell me about my pedigree. I know who I am. I know what I am. But what is disappointing that he would say that about a St. Lucian? That's the point. I have only one passport, Mr. Speaker. I have nowhere else I could run to. One passport. But he said it, Mr. Speaker, and we have it on record that he said it. He asked me to run as a candidate for him before he chose the Lilliputian. He asked me to run for him as Lilliputian. Kokoloram. He asked me to run as a candidate. And I said to him, I cannot do that because I'm a member of the St. Lucia Labour Party. We went there and we lost the election. I am still and remain forever a member of the St. Lucia Labour Party. That is not the United Workers' Party I grew up hearing about. What sort of nastiness are we introducing to our politics? We had some young students there earlier, and to hear what he's saying to them. So you should only aspire to the list of what you see. He's not saying to them, this is the aspiration, let's aim for higher. He's insisting that every single thing we do is at the bottom. You cannot say that to young people. That's Mr. Speaker, this is just unacceptable behavior. And as the member for Cash Resolve say, we need to find a way to have some sanctions in place, Mr. Speaker. You cannot repeat after lie after lie after lie in Parliament when the facts are before you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have every intention to continue to represent the people of ancillary canneries. No small man is removing me from my constituency. Mr. Speaker, I don't know what they have in their minds. But if it's one thing I am sure that I will do, I will secure my victory. And for me to secure my victory, I need to deliver for the people of ancillary canneries. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, when they heard the litany, Mr. Speaker, of what we've achieved so far in ancillary, they had to go out and put out this malarkey, accusing people who have no issue with St. Lucia. Why are you doing that to an investor? Why, Bradley? Why would you do that to an investor? Other investors are watching. That is why they say to us, but hold on a minute, this government comes in, loses the election, another government comes in, and simply because you're not of the same party, you would change an entire policy, not based on any flaws in the policy, simply because politically we don't agree. We have a small country, 248 square miles. Mr. Speaker, we cannot afford to be playing those games with the lives of the people of this country, Mr. Speaker. It's not simply for me. I know for a fact I will be able to survive. But the people who I represent, Mr. Speaker, if they do not get planes coming into St. Lucia, if they do not get the tourists coming into St. Lucia, what are we going to do for the revenue? And I urge the member for Mico South, Mr. Speaker, if he wants to be, I don't know if he ever will be again, but if he wants to be, Mr. Speaker, to lead this nation again, to take those things into consideration. There is nowhere else he should be but sitting right there. This is what the people elected you to do. This is the business of the people. Where is he gone? Where has he gone? He went to the bathroom, but he took his bag. You should be here sitting, listening to this thing. We cannot afford to be taking those chances, Mr. Speaker. And for that, Mr. Speaker, I will continue to support the Prime Minister, my government, and my cabinet in putting the people first, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will emphasize the importance of structuring the Sovereign Wealth Fund so that it allows St. Lucia to eventually finance elements of its climate adaptation and mitigation plans, whilst also serving as a catalyst to unlock more funds and can be channeled to related economic development, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's clear in the legislation, the fund's objective, the structure, the investment policy. These are conversations we are yet to have with the people of the St. Lucia. We will go to the people of St. Lucia and explain to them the benefit of supporting the Sovereign Wealth Fund of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. This is something that we, as a small island development state, need. You hear every time, Mr. Speaker, that the World Bank takes time to deliver. They deliver, but they take time. The CDB takes time to deliver. So every single time we have a catastrophe in this country, Mr. Speaker, if you don't meet a particular threshold, you don't benefit. We need to be able to have something somewhere that says, if there's a flood in Ancillary, a flood in Grosley, we don't have to worry our heads of how we're going to address it, because we've already captured funds to deal specifically with climate change, Mr. Speaker. 368 million US dollars. That didn't come from me. That came from an independent assessment. And we are simply trying to do what we can to be able to deliver in that eventuality, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this act has synergies with other initiatives currently being undertaken, including, Mr. Speaker, St. Lucia's proposed launching of a thematic bond, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we need innovative ways to be able to deal with the issues of this country. We can't simply rely on taxing and spending, Mr. Speaker. We need other ways to be able to generate growth and assist the people in this country, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues before me, Mr. Speaker, have said everything that is very important to be said about this particular bill. I would just like to say one more thing, Mr. Speaker. Progress, Mr. Speaker, lies not in enhancing what is, but in advancing to what will be, Mr. Speaker. And with those few words, Mr. Speaker, I give my 100%, Mr. Speaker, to the creation of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.